I'm live. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm sure it might take a few minutes before anyone starts popping in, but my plan today is to continue working on Octo. I mean, like I said before, that's really what I'd like to spend my time on. I'm hoping today to get through at least one more issue. I know the last one we picked out was pretty straightforward and pretty simple. But today, I'm hoping that maybe we can grab one that's just slightly more difficult and will be slightly more useful as well. Give me just a moment. I want to make sure things are pulled up here on my end. Always a little bit of work to do here just to make sure everything's looking good and looking right. Okay, looks like it's good. Looks like I'm being cut off a little bit with my green screen here. Hey Pika, how's it going? Thanks for coming in. Thanks for stopping by. Or hanging out, or whatever you're planning to do. So, well, that is not the music I thought I was playing. There we go. Need something a little more calm and relaxing in the background. Awesome. Glad you're excited to hang out. I'm good. I was just mentioning, maybe before you hopped on here, that my goal today is going to be slightly different. I'm really hoping to pick up another issue, which we did last time, but I'm really hoping to add a slightly larger feature this time, which means, we'll spend a little bit more time coding rather than just talking conceptually or just hanging out, which obviously I love hanging out too, but part of the goal here is to make some progress on Octo. And the last one was obviously really nice from like a UX perspective. It was super useful in that aspect. But I feel like this, adding an entirely new feature, is going to be a pretty cool demonstration of the Octo code base, or at least yet another portion of it. And I'm just hanging out for a minute. I don't know if anyone else is going to be stopping in, but I figure I'll give it a couple of minutes before, before I start diving in too deeply. Hey, Hannah, how's it going? Big brain. I don't know, but thank you. Maybe. Yeah, the last one we were getting to know Octo exactly, and I really hope to continue to kind of like introduce Octo and introduce some of its features, maybe a little bit more in depth. I also got a couple of more things sorted out on my end so that hopefully we don't run into any issues like taking the site down, for instance, this time. I feel like I'm squinting a little bit. There's a lot of light coming into my eyes. I think I have to readjust to this like white background that I'm looking at the moment. But yeah, again, like thanks Hannah, thanks for coming in again. Still at work, huh? Wow. Well, hopefully work is going well. And hopefully you're able to get off work soon, because, who wants to be stuck at work? How's everything sound for you all? Does the audio sound okay? Awesome. Glad to hear it. And yeah, like I said, I was giving it a minute, trying to think. Also, you might notice there's no music in the background. Again, that's going to take some extra software and some extra setup that I just didn't get to. This is only the second stream that I'm doing on my channel, although I actually did do a collaborative stream on someone else's channel on Saturday. That was a lot of fun. We got to work with a technology called Webassembly. More specifically, we worked in Webassembly text format, which is a much lower level language. It offers like a much like simpler instruction set in terms of like how you write the code, but the idea there is to kind of work at a lower level and really eke out performance as best as possible. I mean, really, when it comes to the text format, like that was more of just an experimental project for fun, right? You know, Guy, the person I was streaming with, and I both really enjoy kind of just like really getting into the details of how things work and nerding out over those kinds of things. So it was absolutely a lot of fun. I guess, yeah, we're already almost at the 5-minute mark. I say it was probably a good time to get started here. So I've kind of been looking at 2 different issues that I would like to pick up, and one of them has been around for a little while, but the other one I actually just thought of, and they're closely related. So in Octo, I guess it'd be a good time to pull this up. So let me go ahead and get that running. I'll open a new tab here so we don't have our main tab taken up. But in Octo here, if we run serve dev, this is a command that I have set up that'll actually run the dev server. Oh yes, thank you for the reminder. I'm glad that you called that out. Also, sorry for the coughing. I'm going to hopefully be able to switch to Streamlabs in time and like mute myself next time that's going to happen. Go ahead and enlarge the text. Actually, you know what? If I just close that and open another tab here, I wonder. Awesome, yeah. Now they're both the same size. So we're going to start the dev server. How's that font size? Does that look okay? Awesome. And while that's running, I'll go ahead and enlarge the font size in our editor here. I'll just open a random file. Whoops. Or yeah, that works. I'm also going to look on my other screen here to see. It's slightly behind me here. I feel like that looks a little bit better. So both of these we have quite a bit larger, and I think that's totally fine though. I mean, I obviously with, again, like I mentioned last time, this larger monitor makes it so I can still fit quite a bit of content on here, even with the larger text. And then, yeah, as far as I mean, honestly, in the browser, I can even enlarge that a little bit too. Sometimes that'll really affect like the actual look of the application, and so I might not do it on everything, but I'll at least do it here on GitHub so that we can see a bit better. So now that I launched Octo, you can see here in the output that the app is available at localhost :8888. So one little tidbit of information that's pretty interesting, or at least I find interesting, that you might find kind of useful, is that this trailing piece, this colon and then some numbers, is known as a port number. When you bind an application on a machine and make a name available, you have to bind that name to a port and expose it under a given port number. When you go to a website, I'm going to just github.com as an example, actually. If we go back to github.com, browsers actually use 2 ports by default when you open websites. If they're being served under HTTP, so note the lack of the S, they automatically bind to port 80. So going to github.com:80 is the same as going to just github.com without the HTTPS, so without the secure portion. HTTPS actually binds to a port 443. And so if we add :443 here, you should see that it just redirects you back here to github.com again. And so there's 2 reasons that redirection happens. Or rather, there's a reason that both of those redirections happen. The port 80 redirection happens because GitHub wants you to be served securely, so it's automatically going to redirect you back to the HTTPS version of the site, which again is served on 443. The 443 port itself is redirected because the browser knows that HTTPS is served over 443 by default, and HTTP is served over 80 by default. So the browser just automatically actually removes those ports so that you don't see them here, because that's just one more piece of information that's a little bit confusing that you just don't really need to know about as an end user. So when I'm serving something on my local machine, I can bind it to any given port, really any port that's open. So in a given network, you can only expose like one name to a single port. And so I could launch my test server on localhost :80. and then it would be available just by typing in the word localhost. I wouldn't actually have to have the number :80. The reason that I don't do that is because 80 is used by a lot of different software, and I occasionally, as a developer by day, occasionally have software running on my machine that requires me to use port 80. And so for my side projects, I pick a random port number. You know, the namespace for ports is pretty large. I don't remember the exact breadth of it, but it's everything from like port 1 all the way up to like 60 some thousand something. So really large, you know, like a 64000, right? Like a pretty large number. And you can steal any one of those ports to like serve an application under in a local network. For Octo, hence, you know, the name Octo, I went ahead with 8s, and typically for like any sort of like web dev sort of side server, things are bound to like a 4-digit number. Just what I see commonly, you know, probably no specific reason for that. And so that's why I did 4 8s. So no real reason, but that's what I chose to do. So if we go here to localhost :8888, you'll see that it loads up the server that I just ran here in my terminal. So let's see. So we see Octo here. We actually do have probably not many documents, like one big document, a couple little things that I've tested out. But as I'm like taking notes throughout the day, you know, I might create a note about food. You know, something delicious. And later in the day, I might need to take another note, and I might instead of going through my list of notes here, because say I've created like, I don't know, 10, 20 notes throughout the day, I might decide that I want to add another note under the food tag. And like the simplest way to do that is to create a new note with the food tag, you know, something else delicious. And that's not like bad from a user experience. If I go to the food tag over here on the left-hand side, I know it's pretty messy right now because of what we were testing last time. And you see there's a couple of notes here under food, or a couple of documents, I should say. I'm trying to move away from the term note because while it can be used for a note, I'm trying to move this app beyond just note-taking and really help it become like a writing app for developers. And so you might see here, like I have these two notes. They're actually really related. They obviously have the same tag. But one thing I find myself needing very often is the ability to merge these into one. Because I don't actually need two separate documents that both talk about things that are delicious. I just happened to create a new one when I came back here because it was simpler than going and like searching through all my notes to find the document that I already had. So one of the features here that's in my issues list here that I actually just added earlier today is the ability to merge documents. I want to be able to, whether it's on this page or some other page, I want to be able to select like one or multiple documents and have them all merge down into one. And that way, when I'm like on the fly, like trying to quickly just jot something down, I can create that new note. I'll say note in this instance because that really is what I'm using it for. I'll create that new note, and then later in the day when I'm not as busy or I'm not trying to like hurry on, I will be able to just like reconcile everything that I wrote down for the day and then like merge things together if it makes sense and just organize my app a little bit better. Now, of course, one thing I could do is I could just go in here, or better yet, if I go back, I could go in here, I could take this document, I could copy it, go back, go in here, you know, paste it down below, remove the duplicate tag. We'll pretend this had some content, and we'll pretend, you know, this had some other content. We'll just pretend these are two separate notes that I just like merged together, right? But I copied and pasted it, and that obviously works. And then I can go back in here and I can just delete this older one. I can just click discard and it's gone. Now I don't permanently delete anything, so it's under the discarded tab here. So I can go back and restore it if I decide that I actually do want to keep that note or document. But again, the idea here is that I can manually already achieve what I'm trying to do. But from a user experience perspective, it would be a lot nicer if I could just go in and say, I want to merge these two things, right? Be a lot simpler to be able to do that. So that's one of the features that I would like to implement. The other feature is kind of the opposite, where say I have a note here. I'm trying to think. Actually, one thing that I do very often is I'll create notes about like Twitch or streaming, for instance. So I'll say Twitch. I'll just do my own little syntax here for storing the date. So I'll say, you know, it's 2020, October 26th. That's the day. And then, you know, whatever my notes are going to be. So thoughts, right? And then I will, I don't know. I'll just have some content. Maybe it has like another subheader, but like this whole note ends up becoming almost like a template. It's like I would do this anytime I stream, or, you know, since I mod Tiff's channel, I would do this anytime she streams. I would kind of write out notes for her stream because it's a lot easier for me to just hop on there and write down some notes while she's in the middle of streaming, right? So because this is kind of like a template, I often find myself coming in here and just like, you know, copying this whole thing from one day, repasting it, and then just changing like the date, right? Just changing the date. And then obviously deleting some of the content, and like that's not bad, but what would be nice is when I'm in this like list view and I look under the Twitch tag, so I hop over here and see Twitch, it'd be cool if I could just either from this screen or from the note itself, click a little button that says duplicate. So I create a new note based off of this one instead of having to copy, start a new note, paste. Saves me just a little bit of time, right? Like it's nothing crazy, but those little efficiencies really do add up throughout the day when you want your tools to be as out of the way as possible. You want them to be super useful, and you don't want to have to think about how to do something. Actions that happen commonly, you want to be like really simple. So hence the other issue that we have here, which is the ability to duplicate a document. So we kind of have, you know, those two different sides to a very similar problem. So I honestly think that duplicating, not going too deep into the technical part right this second, but I do think that the duplicating piece, based on like how I already know it's going to be implemented, will be quite a bit simpler than the merging piece. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but reconciling, because this app can be used across devices. I kind of talked previously about Octo and how you can log in and things sync across devices using a technology called Firebase. Because things sync across devices, if I were to merge two documents on one device, I would have to figure out a way to reconcile that when it syncs back to another device, right? So if I have two different documents, each having their own identifiers, just a little ID that kind of represents that each document is the same. That's how I actually copy data like between devices, right? You have to have some sort of way to identify that it's the same document that was edited, and you just happen to edit this one more recently. But, you know, if I because of that feature of being able to synchronize across devices, if I were to just like take the content of one and shove it under another document and then delete that document, there would be no way for my app to know that it needs to do the same thing when it does this whole synchronization. It would just update that one document, but the one that I deleted would either be, you know, deleted, or nothing would happen. It might not even do a deletion unless I did a soft delete, which again, a soft delete just means that it's not really gone. I can go back in and restore it. And that's kind of like the trade-off I have to decide on is, do I want to do a soft delete? Do I want to do a soft delete and still like just keep the original document under this, you know, discarded tab, or do I want to actually delete it because I really am merging two things into one and the content isn't gone? The only thing that's gone is the separation of that content. So I do feel like the merging is going to be a little bit more involved, and so I think that for today's purpose, and also it's been a feature that I've had here in the issues list for almost a month now, as you can see, I think for today's purpose, we're going to add the ability to duplicate a document. And this one I feel like is actually going to be fairly straightforward and not require a lot of work. So I'm going to go ahead and open this issue up just to see, you know, as a user, I should be able to create a duplicate of a document with the click of a button and possibly a shortcut, right? I'm all about shortcuts, so maybe we'll even add a keyboard shortcut. But for starters, you should be able to just click a button to duplicate a document. At its most basic form, I would imagine that this button would appear in, new tab here, would appear in the document view, meaning if I had a document open here, this one right here, you can already see there's a discard button over here on the top right. So maybe right underneath it, there would be like a duplicate button. So that's kind of what I'm thinking there in terms of the most basic feature is we add a button to this screen. It says duplicate, and it takes the current document you're looking at, creates a new one, and then makes that new one the active document, right? Because the one that when you create a copy of something, you typically want to edit that new copy, not the original document that you copied. Now, beyond that, it would obviously be kind of nice, obviously, if we had a duplicate feature here on the list view. So maybe like a button down here that says that we're going to duplicate the note without even clicking into it. Because obviously, if you're looking at a list here, and especially the way Octo is set up where it doesn't actually condense the text, it shows you everything. If you're looking at this list view, you might say, oh yeah, that's the one I want to duplicate. You know, again, trying to save as many clicks or keystrokes as possible. It would be cool if you could just click right here and say duplicate rather than having to click into it first and then going over here and clicking duplicate. So again, just a couple of thoughts there, just trying to figure out what makes sense. But for starters, let's do the simplest form. You know, I'm always trying to advocate for doing the simplest thing first, and then, you know, from there we can kind of add functionality based on whether or not we have the time for it. If we don't have the time, it would be much better to just have this basic functionality, deploy it, so make it available online, than it would be to try to do everything and not quite get it done in time. All right, give me 1 second here. I just need to check something. Okay, sorry about that. Just to check in on a couple of things real fast. So, let's see. Let's get a blank canvas here. So we've got our app up on its landing page here for a new document. We have our issue pulled up here. Again, I use this because when I create a new branch, similar to like what we did last time. Oh. Hey, Ian, thanks for hopping in, man. At what point in our childhood did you have time to get so smart? I mean, I don't think it's like, I don't think intelligence level is gonna like make or break anyone's ability to learn coding. I think that, you know, it might affect someone's ability to like go to some extreme or something, but you know, I'm not a physicist or anything. I don't think I'm doing anything that's like way outside of the realm of anyone's possibilities here. It's just something I had an interest in. I mean, you know, so talking about our childhood, like I just did little bits, you know. I mean, it's not like well, there are probably times when I was, but it's not like every day I was just at home for like hours and hours studying. Like I just had like a real interest in this topic, and I squeezed in time anytime I could. So, you know, if I only had 20 minutes one day to do a little bit of coding or read a little bit about coding, like I just shoved it in. Like I was just super interested in the topic. I found it fascinating. I think part of that has to do with like my like a younger childhood of not really understanding technology or really having much access to it. And so once I finally like sort of did dive into the world of like coding and started realizing like at a very basic level, like how computers kind of work, I was just super fascinated by it. So I couldn't get enough of it. And, you know, over the years, it adds up. I mean, I don't know if you were on here last time I streamed, but I started thinking back, and I've been learning software development for 10 years now. It's crazy to think about, but that time really does add up. It adds up a lot. And you don't have to dedicate that. You don't have to dedicate, your entire life to it if you're in it for the long run, right? So if this is something you want to learn and this is something you want to do, a little bit of time consistently over a long period of time will add up, and it's something that you could eventually pick up, even if you could only spend, say, like 15 to 30 minutes a day on it. And actually, like, that's something I'll just go ahead and like mention right now. I've talked to Tiff about this a little bit. In gaming, you might be interested in this, but I think that fairly soon I'm going to start an intro to web development series here on Twitch. There is a resource online known as the Odin Project. Super awesome resource available for learning web development from scratch, being, self-taught, not having to go to a college or go to a boot camp for. It's completely free. It's a whole curriculum. And I think what I'd like to do is, I think I would like to do the Odin Project in my own time, and then for each lesson, I think I would like to do a stream dedicated to the lesson, going over the problems, doing them here live with everyone, talking about the kind of gotchas, and then opening it up for a Q&A so that if there are any questions that any of you have, I'm available and I can sit here and really try to help understand your own perspective, try to give you answers, and if my answers aren't good enough, hopefully be able to rephrase it and kind of like shine a new perspective towards you so that you can get the concept that you might be struggling with. And, web development, software in general is something I love. It's something I've always thought and like wanted other people to be into as well, because it's very liberating. Not to go too deep into this topic, because we did talk about this quite a bit last time, but, knowing software development, having that as a toolkit, liberates you in today's age. Like, it really does. You can get into just about any industry, and it's amazing. If you don't like coding itself, that's okay, because you can just use coding as a basic tool. Everyone has to grind at some point, right? Like, not saying that should be your life or that should be like your entire existence, but there is a little bit of grinding involved if you don't enjoy software development. But that can be a small piece of what you do for a living, right? Like, I'm to the point now where I don't spend 100% of my time coding. I spend a lot of my time learning about the industry, learning about the problems that our specific users are facing, and I get to I get to work with these people. I get to work with these people that want to use the software that I get to help build, and I get to understand their problems, and I get to understand their whole industry. And the cool thing is, if I don't like the industry, I can change industries. Software development, again, is a toolkit that you can use in any industry. So it really liberates you in terms of what you do in your day-to-day and what you get to spend a big focus of your time on. And I won't say I've always loved my job in software development. I've definitely had shitty jobs, but for the last 4 to 5 years, I've really loved what I've been doing. And I don't think that's something a lot of people can say. I'm going to try to catch up on chat here. I think I missed a lot because I was just going on and on. Sorry for the rambling. But again, this is just something that I'm passionate about. So engaging. I'm glad to hear it. I really try to be. You all are smart. You just nerd out to different things, which is so dope. Exactly, right? That's what it is. What do you spend your time on? That everyone can be amazing at anything if they dedicate 90% of their free time to that thing, right? And I just happened to, for a long period of my life, dedicate a lot of time towards software development. I wasn't really into a lot of other things, to be completely honest. Let's see. Glad everyone's welcoming everyone in. That is awesome. Stop being distracting. No, definitely not being distracting. And I'm glad that you're listening in. Awesome, Ian. I'm glad to hear that you're in for that. Again, I think it would be a lot of fun. I think it would, as I think I saw someone say down below, it would introduce a new type of accountability that would be pretty cool. Tiff, glad to hear you think it would be amazing. Yeah, Odin Project. Exactly. Odin Project is amazing. Oh, again, best resource out there that I've seen myself and also heard from just numerous sources. And yeah, gaming, again, don't feel like you're interrupting. The whole point is for you to be able to say whatever you want here, respectfully, of course. Say whatever you want here and ask as many possible questions as you can. You have a web dev Udemy course you've been meaning to work on. Yeah, there's so many resources available now. Yeah, commitment is hard. It really is, you know, and that's what it comes down to. I feel like the biggest problem a lot of people have is trying to overcommit. You know, and we just kind of like work this way as humans, right? Where we have like waves of inspiration and waves of like motivation, and then like sort of these ruts of lack of inspiration and motivation. But consistency is so key. Web development is one of those things. There's way too much knowledge to ever know. Like I'm constantly learning still, and like what you need to be able to do is you need to be able to just work on it, even the tiniest bits consistently, right? Like whether that's daily, whether that's weekly, you got to pick some sort of interval for yourself that makes sense. But you know, you have to always look at it from the long run and say, am I being consistent? You don't have to say, am I putting in a lot of time? Just, am I being consistent? And that's the biggest thing, because then over time, you'll start to see the results. It's like, you know, it's like working out. It's like anything in life. Voracious deed. We're not going to talk about that though. But oh, all right. I ranted on about that quite a bit. So let's dive in here. So again, the feature we're going to work on is the ability to duplicate a document here in Octo. I mentioned last time I like to start my branches off with the issue number if there's a specific issue that we're tackling here. So we're going to do that. We're going to check out a new branch called 47 hyphen ability to duplicate a document. We're going to bring that branch up onto GitHub. Cool. So now we're ready to kind of get started here. So let's think about this problem. Let's try to, at a high level, like talk about it, break it down. When I have a document in active context, so I have a document focus, this is where we're starting. I want to be able to duplicate that document. Kind of thinking about the future a little bit, it's not just like if I have a document in context, I might even just have a list of documents I might want to be able to duplicate one. So knowing a little bit about the Octo code base, actually give me 1 second, I need to drink some water. Just talking and talking. Also, you probably just heard me drinking right in that mic. I'm so terrible about that. So knowing a bit about the Octo code base, I already know exactly where to go here. So thinking conceptually, when I talk about a document, there's a couple of properties about that document that I need to keep track of. Whether that document is in active context, meaning I have it selected here. So if we just grab a random one right here, this is like an active document. I am actively looking at it. I can edit it. I can just interact with it in any way that I want. But you also have documents not in active context, meaning there's not a particular document that you can interact with directly without some very specific user interaction. And that would be like a list of documents, right? We've got multiple here. And I can, to an extent, because I've added these abilities, I can interact with each one in like on this page by saying discard, or I can click one to open it. But for the most part, I can't do all the things. Like I can't modify the content from here, right? And then I think that's pretty much it. We either have a document in active context or we have a document in a list view. But either way, the point is I may want to interact with this document from multiple places. So because of that, and because I want to be able to display the content in multiple places, I have created what's known as a model or a representation of a document, a specific object that contains information, and I have a list of these objects, and the information tells me things like what is the ID, what is the actual text in the document, what you see here, what are the tags in this document. So you see I put Twitch in these, but I could very easily just add a tag anywhere in here, mind you, so some content tagged. And you see over on the left-hand side here, it says tagged. This new tag is available, and it has our document right here. A document needs to be able to store information related to these tags. It needs to store information related to when it was created and when it was modified. You notice in these lists it says updated on Monday, October 26th, 2020 at 9:41 p.m. Excuse me. So on the code side of things, I want to represent that same concept, and so I've created something called a model. So in here, if I open up my document model, which I actually may have just called doc now that I think about it. Yep, totally did. You'll notice that we have this concept, and I don't want to go too deep into all of these different concepts about, like, you know, what is an import, what is a class, what is a constructor, all these things. Again, like, that's why I think it would be amazing to do a sort of like introductory level course in all these concepts. So I don't want to slow it too far down. But at a high level here, what we have is this class is our representation of the document itself. A constructor is just a way for me to say, when I want to talk about a document, here's the information I already know about it, and now I can pass around this reference to that document anywhere I want in the code base. So it's kind of like the starter. Like when I fetch this document from my server, I can say, here you go, here's what I know about it. And then later, when I want to actually interact with it, that's when we can call these other methods like discard, if I want to discard the document. And that changes the updated at, the touched at, the discarded at. Restore is kind of the inverse, right? So we nullify the discarded at. Touch is a concept I'm not going to get too far into right now, but it updates this timestamp. And then update is where we actually go in and we update the text. And because tags are actually pulled from the text itself, again, right, I can write anywhere in here and add a tag wherever I want. Because tags are just sort of deduced by the content, or the content is reduced down to its tags, another way to say it. All you do is update the text, and the tags are automatically parsed from that text. And so because I already kind of have this one object that kind of gets passed around all over the code base, I feel like this is the best place to go to say, hey, I want to duplicate this document. And because duplication requires an active document, I think it makes sense to make it a method in here. So I think I'm just going to create a new method here called duplicate. And duplicate, instead of modifying, this is just a representation to whatever object, whatever document we're talking about at the time. And so instead of modifying an existing one, what I'm really going to be doing is something similar to what I've done down here, where I'm saying I want to return a new document, a copy. So for duplicate, we're going to say return new doc. And I don't want to return a new empty document. Simple sphere. Hey, how's it going? Glad that you were able to stop in. New here, awesome stuff. Checking your GitHub and is amazing. Awesome, glad to hear that. And again, thank you for stopping in, and thank you for saying hello too. If you have any questions at all, you know, feel free to put them here in chat, or if you just want to chat at all, feel free to say whatever you would like. I'm glad that you're able to make it by. And you know, hopefully you get something out of this, and hopefully you enjoy your time here. So right now, just to give you a quick heads up of what we're doing is, we're working on this application called Octo. It's a writing app for developers. Maybe you saw it if you were on my GitHub. And we're adding functionality to be able to just duplicate a document. It's one of the issues on my GitHub at the moment, actually, issue number 47. Any way to contribute? Yeah, so this app is open source. I'm always accepting of multiple types of support, but primarily feedback is the best thing. I don't exactly have this set up very well yet for contributions, but that doesn't mean you can't, right? So feedback is the most important, but the second most important is we've got these open issues. You can either create them, or if you want to do a full... No, fund-wise, but yeah. No, I'm not... That's why I actually said 2, because the third would be funding, but the 2 that actually matter to me would be... providing feedback, opening an issue if you find something, like think of a feature that you think would be good, or find a bug especially. But again, that second one would be opening a pull request. There's already issues here, so absolutely feel free. I'm always happy to help, like, work through if I don't feel the pull request is perfect. But if you submit one, I will try my best to be as responsive as possible. You know, I'm not necessarily gonna say I'll be able to respond to you within like an hour or something like that, but I do try to keep an eye on this repo, and I do actively work on it. And so if you submit a PR, I will happily give you some feedback. I actually just recently, within the last like 2 weeks, had my first contributor other than myself in here. And usually the conversations are like really straightforward. So you can see here, For example, they gave me a pull request. I had just a couple of like minor suggestions, and they made the changes, and then I merged it in. That simple. I don't have a contributing.md file, so I don't really have like an explicit like rule on like how you go about things. Just try your best to match the styles, try your best to match Vue.js guidelines, and try to test it thoroughly. When I merge something into master, it isn't released immediately, so I also will do my own testing prior to releasing a new version. But yeah, thank you so much, and like feel free to hack away at it, and hopefully you're able to learn the code base a little bit by watching us here. So going back to this, so talking about this doc model. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. So we're returning a new instance of the document, and really we want to copy essentially everything except for the ID. Excuse me. So let's see, we want to copy the text. We don't really want to copy encryption either. So we're going to do an explicit sort of copy here. So we're going to copy the text, which is going to be this dot text. We're going to copy the created at. We're not going to copy either. Updated at we wouldn't copy. Touched at, discarded at. So really, it's, now that I think about it, it's actually one thing. We're just copying the text. I mean, really, when you duplicate it, I mean that makes sense in hindsight, but as a user, all you really care about is that you have the same like text copied over, and then you're going to edit it right away anyways, more than likely. You probably aren't going to have multiple of the same document that are completely identical. So we're going to create a new instance of the document with the same text. The ID will be generated on the fly, and everything else, including the tags, will be parsed on the fly as well. So it's pretty simple, actually. One line or three-liner, I guess, if you include the actual method definition. But I think that's going to give us our functionality of just being able to say, I have a document, now I want to create that duplicate. So I'm going to save that model. Next, we're going to want to add the functionality of saying, like, hey, I have this document, I want to actually duplicate it. So we need to add the button, the user interaction piece. So for that, I just know off the top of my head, I think last time I talked a little bit about how this is broken down into components because we're using Vue.js here, and so it's broken down into component Vue files, so template files. And I know that this main section, this main like body here, is known as the editor. That is the actual component that it's in, and so the editor is where we're going to be adding our new button that says duplicate. So let's go into the code base, open the editor. All right, and you'll notice here we already have a couple of buttons. We've got that discardable action, which this essentially flips based on whether or not the document's already been discarded. It will either say discard, or if you've already discarded it, this button will actually say restore, so you can restore it. If you have code in your document here, so if I have like a little snippet of code, and I will call it JS, just a really basic ES6 function here, you'll notice that this new button comes up called Sandbox. And that, happy to get into if anyone is interested, but that Sandbox integration is actually a way for Octo to scan your code blocks and convert them into individual files on sandbox.io. I mean, honestly, I'll just show you real quick. I mean, it's super simple. So if I call this file index.js and I click code sandbox, you'll see it creates a new code sandbox IO project with a file called index.js with your code block right here. And that's it. And of course, it actually is going to say it's invalid because by default, it doesn't have ES6 support for some reason, even though modern browsers actually support it. So it requires like a Babel plugin, I believe. Expected an assignment or function call and instead so, oh, well, I mean, actually, that does make sense. I didn't assign it to like a const. So it was actually just invalid. But anyway, that's one of the buttons that's sort of conditional. And again, this duplicate button, though, is not going to be conditional. So I'm probably going to insert it between discard and sandbox over here. All right, let me go ahead. Where was I? Yes. So we're instead of putting it under the sandbox button, since again the sandbox button is conditional, this one won't be conditional. So we're just going to insert it here. For starters, we'll just do a basic button. And we're using Bootstrap here for the styling. I mentioned last time I actually would really like to convert over to Tailwind at some point, but for now we're still using Bootstrap. And so we're going to give it a class of button. What did we give our other ones? Button secondary, button small. Okay, so those are the classes that we're going to actually just duplicate here. Thanks for stopping by, Ian. Like seriously, I'm glad that you're able to stop in. Thanks for chatting, and hopefully I'll catch you at the next one. Have a good night. So in our button here, what are we going to say? It's just going to be basic. We're going to say duplicate, right? One more thing that I typically do with these sort of interactions is I really like the combination of an icon and text. And the reason is because text by itself is nice, but really for the most part, you do have to read it to see what it says, especially if you have multiple like sort of text elements that are very similar, if the words are very similar. Icons are super nice because if you see them, icons can very quickly give you an idea of what it does. But as an accessibility concern, I don't like to use just icons because if you use just icons, for some people, it's actually really hard to distinguish them. And so I've read in the past, and I also just really agree with this idea that if you're going to use icons, you should use icons alongside text. If you're just going to use icons, that's totally sufficient as well, but you want to be very careful about the complexity of the icons and the contrast of those icons. But for this sake, especially on desktop, I believe it's going to be the same on mobile, we're going to use an icon combination with the text. So given that, I'm going to go ahead, and we're going to keep this in the simplest form for now. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this in a span tag. Whoops, got to close that one. And then we're going to have another tag alongside this duplicate inside of here. And what do I want to call it? I'm probably going to, actually, you know what, I believe it's just an SVG if I remember correctly. So if we go to getbootstrap.com, this is where we can look up our icon set. I am using Bootstrap 4. And there's probably one for copy or duplicate. Man, unfortunately, the search in the Bootstrap icon set is not great. So sometimes I really just have to scan through here. So send to back is not exactly what I'm looking for. Typically there's like a side by side, almost like this bookmarks feature, but for like a file. And so unfortunately sometimes I really have to scan through here manually and find the correct icon set, but I do want to make sure that the icon makes sense and that at first glance, even if you don't read what it says, that hopefully the icon can kind of convey that message anyway. We have these file icons, which I'll just show off right here real quick, that I've already used in the past. So this you can see here on untagged and on add document. Those are Bootstrap SVG icons, and I think they have a similar one for copying. I just have to find it here. Oh, there's also a plus, which could potentially do it. Although, again, I feel like that's more of like an add new sort of interaction. We could use the same icon that we use for the new document. Here we go. Look at that. So boom, you see here we've got files, just 2 of them, and usually that's a good indicator of duplication. Now I would love it if there was an earmarked one, since we're already using the earmarked file set, but there might not be. I see file earmark. Actually, if I just reduce this down, I might just be missing it, but there also might not be one earmark. Looks like I might be out of luck with the earmark, so we might just use the basic file one for duplication here. And I think that was file. And oh, of course, file earmark is going to show up as well. Files, alt, files, boom. I think this will be sufficient for now, and of course, we can always update it later, right? Like, nothing is permanent. This is an ongoing project, and so if it ends up being confusing or a little messy looking, then we'll change it. All right, so we're going to add this little SVG icon in the same button that we have duplicate in. Another thing that I know I'm going to need to do here is add deflex and align items center. This will make sure that our icon and our text are centered vertically inside of that button. And actually, I might even just show off the difference here in a second. But first, let's see if that worked. Boom, look at that. So we've got our button here. It says duplicate. We have our icon set. I'm going to blow this up a bit just because I know it might be a little harder to see on stream, just for a moment. So you see this button here, we have duplicate. It looks like a copy sort of icon there. And if I don't add that flex, those flex helpers like I added, I just want you to see. Oh, well, first of all, it's an inline element, which isn't what we want. So I'll just do dblock, which is like kind of like the default for most divs. And it's kind of hard to tell, honestly, but maybe when I switch it back now, it'll be more noticeable. Yeah, it's so subtle. But there is a slight difference, a little hard to tell. And those are just like the little things that kind of like irk me. And if I don't fix them, like it'll really drive me crazy because I will notice it. But vertical alignment of elements. And so using the deflex and align item center is a super useful way of saying, these are utility classes in Bootstrap for display flex and align items with the value of center. And Flexbox is amazing. If you don't use it, I highly recommend it. It is supported in pretty much all major browsers now. And it just makes your job way easier when it comes to positioning elements. So we've got our button. It doesn't do anything. I can click it. You can see it's clicked, but it doesn't actually do anything here because we haven't linked up that functionality yet. So now that we have our button here, we need to actually add the functionality. You might notice that some of these others, like this one doesn't because it's hidden behind this other component. But here you can see we've got a button, and this button says @click equals open sandbox. So click is the Vue.js directive. So @click is the Vue.js directive to bind an event, like a user clicking on whatever element you're adding it to. And this directive allows you to call a function from down below, a method, when the user clicks it. And so what's happening is we're saying on this button element, code like sandbox, if the user clicks the button, run open sandbox down below. And open sandbox, you'll see down under methods, is just a method. Which apparently is not where I thought it was, right here. So I thought these were in alphabetical order, apparently not. So open sandbox, though, as you can see, it kind of scans the code blocks, figures out what the actual code is, and then it also allows us to call that code sandbox API and create that project on the fly, and then open it. So after we create it, we're opening that new project in a new tab for the user automatically. We're actually going to be doing something a little bit simpler here, and we're going to add a method here called duplicate document. And this document is just this method is just going to do a couple of things. First, it's going to say, well, let's think. What are we going to do? I guess there's a couple of things. So I could just duplicate the document here, but that kind of actually breaks our design pattern of using the Vuex store. So I could say like this dot document dot duplicate. This .document is talking about whatever document you have open in the editor. And again, as we mentioned before, that's talking about our document model here. And so I can call any of these methods. I could call .discard, I could call .duplicate, .restore, .touch, what have you. And so for this, I'm going to zoom that back out. Just a little bit harder for me to focus on when it's that large, especially from a UI perspective. Whoops. Let me switch back over here. And so we could call duplicate here, but typically I try to put these mutable actions inside what's known as the state store, which is something that is introduced by Vuex, another of the libraries that extends Vue.js, the framework that I'm using for the front end here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new action, which will interact with the store, which will then duplicate the document and return the ID. So quite a few more things we need to do there. But actually, you know what? Yeah, I'm just going to do it the right way. I could do it the simpler way first and then kind of backtrack and show you how to convert that. But honestly, especially because most people watching are not familiar with the code base or potentially not familiar with code, I feel like that might just be even more confusing. So instead, I'm going to add a couple of comments. So what we're going to do is we're going to dispatch the duplicate action. We're going to store the ID returned from that action, and then we're going to redirect the user to the new document. Because again, it's going to get its own like new ID once it's duplicated. I like to add comments just like kind of to work through my thought process before I start writing code, because it's very easy when you start writing code to just keep writing more and more code, kind of following the rabbit hole of where your train of thought was when you started. But personally, I just like to kind of like think through possible scenarios and get a higher level plan in order before I actually even start writing any code. Again, it's funny, like the more I've been doing software development, I feel the less and less code I actually write, and the more thinking about code or planning about the code we're going to write I do. So we're going to dispatch the duplicate action, and kind of we can even just break this down. This is going to call .duplicate on the active document. It's also going to, let's see, it's going to call .duplicate on the active document. It's going to add the new document to the state store. And what else is it going to do? We already said it's going to return the new document ID. So adding these notes here, I'm just kind of doing a little bit further now. Like these parts I kind of just already have in my head. When I think dispatch the duplicate action, I kind of already know I need to do all these things. And that's because, again, I'm just familiar with this application. So let's go ahead and start this off by defining this action. So we're creating a new action here called duplicate document. All the actions are, or not all, but most of the actions are stored in a file called actions under the store folder. In Vue.js and some other projects just kind of represents the project root. So when you see @ in an import, it really just means the source directory, wherever that source directory may live. And so for me, that's right here. So source/store/actions.js. Here we are. These are most of the actions that the main editor can kind of dispatch at will or listen for. So we already have a discard document. I do like to keep these in alphabetical order if possible, although I'm sure I will mess that up plenty. And we're going to say duplicate document. I'm going to copy that into this string here, and I'm going to add it to the default exports down below as well. So boom, we've got duplicate document. What does that mean? That means that we can now import this constant and then dispatch it all over the place wherever we would like. So now that the action is defined, it kind of doesn't matter what order we go in, but I guess I'm going to kind of do this in a little bit reverse order. I'm going to dispatch the action. I'm going to write the code that dispatched the action, and then I'm going to go and actually define the listener for that action dispatch. So if we're in the editor here, if we go back down to our new method down here, duplicate document, you're going to see I'm going to call this .store.dispatch, and I'm going to pass in duplicate document ID this.document.id. Because the store already has all the documents available, we just need to tell the store what the ID is of the document, and it will look it up then. I don't have to pass in all that data or pass all that data around. We try to keep the source of truth in, one place, hence the name source of truth. The other thing that I just skipped on accident is actually importing this action. As I mentioned before, you have to import it first. And so in our import statement here, we're already importing multiple, so it's as simple as adding another line here. Now we're importing duplicate document action as well. Now that we are importing that action and dispatching that action, actually, if I switch back, my app will probably be failing. More than likely, if I refresh the page here. Oh, no, actually. So this is pretty cool. So we're kind of in the user interaction landscape here. This code actually doesn't get run until duplicate document gets called. Duplicate document doesn't get called until we trigger it to be called. And there's nowhere right now that's actually triggering this code to be called because we never bound that click event to our new button. So this is where we go in and we say @click equals duplicate document. Boom. So this is binding that method now to a click event on this button, which means the code will be run once I click that button. So if we go here and click this button, what do we get? We get what we'd expect because we haven't defined that listener yet, which is unknown action type in Vue.x, because Vue.x is a store where you define all of these different actions you want to listen to, and we never defined the actual listener. We only defined the place where we trigger that action to be fired. So this is going to be added to the store. Is actually modularized, which really just means I've kind of broken it down into multiple files. And so one of those store modules is documents, as you'll see here. There is a top-level store, which kind of handles some higher-level ideas, such as telling the editor if it's online or offline, displaying the menu, a couple of like really basic things, putting the editor into context when we select a document, and things like that. But a lot of the functionality is kind of broken down into these different modules. So key bindings, so keyboard shortcuts are all under this key bindings module here, as you can see here. So when I say like Command K A, I want to go to the actionable list. When I say Command K N, I want to go to dashboard, which is where you create a new document. And so the documents module, though, is where we actually do a lot of our manipulations around the document itself. And so when I trigger that action, what do they call it? Duplicate document. This is where it would actually listen to that. So under discard document, we're going to import. Again, you kind of have to import it in whatever file you're going to use it in. So we're going to import the duplicate document action. And then rather than trigger that action to be fired, we're going to create a new action listener here. So again, trying to stick with that sort of like alphabetical idea. U comes after O, so we're going to right here say async duplicate document, context, and ID. So this is a new method we're adding, a new action listener, and this one is going to be fairly straightforward. We're passing in a context. Actually, I'm just going to call that doc. I'm not even going to expand it down into just the ID because who knows, maybe later we need to pass more data around for some reason. So I'll keep it simple. It expects to receive the context, which context can be a very ambiguous word. But in the Vue.x, when talking about Vue.x and talking about the Vue.x store, the context is really the entry point that you need to be able to interact with the rest of the store. So maybe you want to dispatch another action. Maybe you want to commit a change to the store itself. Or maybe you just want to read some data from the store's state. And that's where the context come in hand. So pretty much always in an action, not always, but most of the time in an action, you will need access to the context. And we will, because our context is going to... let's see. Our context is going to commit this duplication to the store. So what would I like to do here? I guess I could do the duplication here in the action, or I could do the duplication here in the mutation. It looks like my current pattern so far, at least, is to do it in the mutation. So I'm just going to do that. But I think it could be argued either way as to whether or not we're... just a second, JSON Web Dev. I'll get to that. So I think it could be argued either way, though, as to whether or not this should happen in the action or happen in the mutation. To follow the current pattern that I've kind of established here, I'm going to do it in a mutation. Okay, so the square bracket syntax is an interesting one. In JavaScript, square bracket notation essentially means I want to resolve something into a string to be used as a sort of like... what would you call that? An expression identifier. So the square bracket syntax, say you wanted to, let's just create a, whoops, using my Octo shortcuts here, that's not going to work. So let's say we just, not Java, let's say we have a new JavaScript file here, and this will only take a second to kind of go over, but we've got a new JavaScript file here, and you want to create a, I don't know, a map, a hash, where typically when you create a hash, you know what the key is going to be, and you can say, the key is hello, and the value world is the thing that can be dynamic, right? So if you want the value to be dynamic, you can say from user input, we're going to fake it out here and say value equals world. The value here, you can just pass in a variable, and it'll evaluate. And then the value of map hello down below, if I say console.log map.hello, what we're going to get here is world, right? Because it dynamically pulled that value out. Now, one thing that you probably don't have to do very often, but one thing that is very possible in JavaScript is, what if you want the key to be dynamic, right? So, okay, yeah, so you've seen it. So I'll continue it just in case there's anyone else listening or watching that isn't familiar with the concept. But the idea is if you want the key to be dynamic here, maybe from user input, maybe not. We'll say from another source, right? Const key equals hello, right? And then this is where it comes in, where you can use, if you said hello here, or sorry, if you said key here, the key would literally be key, which means like map.hello would be null, right? Or probably maybe undefined. It would be missing. We'll just say undefined. I'm pretty sure that's what it would be. And instead, console.log map.key would give us the value of world. But if you want it to interpret key as a variable, all you do is wrap it in square brackets, and then boom. Now it's going to evaluate that expression, and then the result will become the key. So again, map.hello becomes world, and map.key doesn't exist because it's not actually setting the key to key, it's setting the key to the expression, so the evaluation of that expression. But yes, you can use it all over the place. You can use it for objects, you can use it for function definitions. I don't know if you can use it for class declarations, to be honest, but I guess I wouldn't be that surprised if you can. But yeah, you can absolutely use it for method names or just regular function definitions too. So closing that out, we don't need to keep that. And that's what it's doing here. It's pretty much saying, the function name is whatever the value of this constant is, which the value of these constants are just the string version of this constant. It's just common practice to use a constant. And there's a couple of good values that you get from that as well, which would be like, if your IDE actually tracks like variable usage across your project, then it's a lot easier to track this constant than it is to track just a string that says the same thing. Now, modern search and regex, it's like really easy to find those string references too, but I'm just trying to follow best practices here. So also, it does save me a little bit of characters. I don't have to have quotes around everything. I guess I do have to have brackets though, so yet another argument that could kind of be swayed one way or the other. So stepping back into the problem we're actually solving here, and what we're working on is we've got this duplicate document action that we have defined now that doesn't actually do anything, and this is where the magic is going to happen, right? This is where that duplication is going to happen. So we already sort of wrote out our high-level idea of what we know we need to do. We need to really, I guess there's one step I was missing though. We need to find the correct document, then we need to call duplicate on it, then we need to add it to the store, and then we need to return the ID. And so that's what we're going to do here. In duplicate document, following the pattern we've already sort of established prior, I'm going to just commit the mutation. One difference here, however, is that I'm going to return the result of context.commit, which I haven't done previously. And honestly, there's zero harm in doing that, so I probably should just be doing that by default anyway, in case I ever did want to return data. But previously, I haven't really had a need to return any data. So I'm going to return whatever the evaluation of context.commit is. The mutation is going to have the same name as the action, actually, because that's just the pattern I've been following. It seems to be the pattern that people usually follow. And so now we just need to define our mutation. One little difference I'll just call out here is you see that we use the async flag here. There's a reason for that. Actions, by nature, can be synchronous or asynchronous, but in the context of how they're actually interacted with, they're typically asynchronous. I definitely interact with them as an asynchronous operation, and very often my actions I shouldn't say very often, but sometimes my actions can be doing something that might take a bit more time or processing power, and I really don't want to interrupt the UI when that happens. And so it's really good for actions to be asynchronous for that reason. But mutations, according to Vue, have to be synchronous, and it makes sense, right? When you're affecting one central source of truth, it wouldn't make sense if you had to worry about things like race conditions. Well, I guess technically race condition could be a thing, but it wouldn't make sense if you had to worry about like asynchronously like locking the store, right? Like maybe you do something, then you do another asynchronous action, you come back and you modify the state again, and you end up in a very weird state, for lack of a better term. So mutations, according to Vue, are synchronous operations, and that's why they don't have the async prefix on them here. After documents loaded here, we're going to have our duplicate document mutation. It is going to receive state as well as that document. And actually, this is where we can expand it because I know we only need ID. And what are we going to do? First, we're going to find the document. Excuse me. And to find it, we're going to pass in the state and the ID. And I guess I can just say const new doc equals find doc state ID. This is a helper method I have above that actually allows me to just kind of traverse the state store and find the document where the ID matches. And so when I call find doc, I'm also going to call .duplicate on it, because what we really want is the new document. And then I've got a couple of things I'm going to do here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say state.all.push new doc. I'm going to push that new document into the state store. And then I'm going to return new doc. What did I do before? Did I return? I think I said I was going to return the ID. And honestly, again, as to not allow like mutations to happen outside of the store, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to return just the ID. And then that, because this mutation is what the action itself is returning, as you see here, return context.commit. Context.commit, again, just kind of maps to whatever mutation you pass it. But because we're returning the result of that method call, and this method returns newdoc.id, that's what we're going to get back from that action. So all the way back in the editor, where we called this.store.dispatch duplicate document, all of this happens. This is where we're going to say const new doc ID equals await, because again, the actual action itself is asynchronous. We have to use await if we want to wait for it, or we could just use a .then call since it's a promise. But because of that, regardless, we need to wait for this to evaluate, and then we'll get the new document ID, right? So I just want to jump back over to the module, make sure everything looks right from my end. I've been talking and talking as I've been writing this, which is something I'm not that used to doing. So we return the new document, which we know from the model itself is the result because we call return new document. So we return the new document from the .duplicate call. We push the new document into our state, and then we return that ID so that the editor can redirect us to this new document, right? So the editor now, it has the new document ID, and all we need to do, store the ID, return from that action, which we did, right? That's what the variable we just created is for. Now we just need to redirect the user to the new document. And we can do that because we have access to our router. Are you writing tests for this new feature? So I'm ashamed to say this, but Octo does not have any tests at the moment. And actually, you know, that should definitely be one of the things that I do here on stream. I think it would be super valuable for people, and obviously it would be super valuable for Octo. But when it comes down to it, I really care about Octo as an experience. And I think it is a really good experience, but it's really not that complicated of an app yet. That's not a justification. I really do think you should test things. But again, when I started this project, I didn't know it would be where it is now. And I just, you know, for whatever reasons, decided to just start tackling the features, probably because I thought it was fun, and didn't take the time to start building out tests. And honestly, it's probably, I won't say it's for the better, but I'm not that upset about it because the app has changed a lot. And, you know, anytime I need to refactor the code base, I'm also going to have to go and refactor the tests. That said, I do think the code base is stabilizing quite a bit. And so it's probably time to start addressing that, honestly. But yeah, good call out. No, we're not ready in tests yet. The whole setup of Jest would probably take a little while. It's not something I'm super familiar with, so it's definitely not something I plan on doing in this stream. So if we want to redirect the user to the new document, what do we need to do? We need to say this dot router dot push. We need to pass it a name. Excuse me. I think the name of the documents route of a single document is just called document. That is the largest jug of water. Just got it recently. I actually, funny enough, a streamer that I really like to watch, not a dev streamer, just as a disclaimer, this is a game streamer, late night game streamer. From the East Coast perspective, it's late night anyway. And I saw him with something really similar, and it made me realize that it's kind of genius to only have to fill a single water jug for your entire day's worth of water just to be able to make sure I'm drinking enough water. And you can see on here, it even has little indicators of like when you're supposed, it might be mirrored actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I'm pretty sure my my webcam is mirrored, but it says like 7 a.m., 9 a.m., etc. And I actually just refilled it right before this. It was like it was down to like its normal position, but I refilled it right before this stream. But yeah, it's massive, but it makes it so I don't really have to think about, did I drink plenty of water today? Did I only drink a little bit of water when I'm using like just a normal size, like smaller water bottle? Got to stay hydrated, you know. So the name of the route that we're going to is simple enough to look up, so we can just open up the router here. And what we're going to is the single document view, which is somewhere, apparently, oh yeah, it's document/ID, so I probably went right by it, honestly. There it is. And that opens up the editor, and it has a param that it accepts, which props true. Hydro, homie. Exactly. So props true is just another Vue.js, or sorry, it's more of a Vue router property that you can pass in that says any parameters that are injected in the URL, I want you to insert those into whatever component I'm mounting as a prop. And you'll notice if we look in the editor's prop definitions here that, wait, hang on a sec. Or no, sorry, it doesn't actually, is that not what, oh, I'm completely losing my train of thought here. Sorry about that. Props true does inject a prop parameter in if you pass in query parameters, direct query parameters, and injects them as params here. And this is useful because of some of the redirecting that we do when we redirect from one document to a new document when we're creating a new one. We kind of want to maintain the cursor position. That's what this is for. But that's what props true does. The param itself, however, is available under a separate parameter called, I want to say like query, as whatever the named param is called. So it's going to be like query.id is what's going to give us the path ID that was passed into this document. So when we redirect to the document, we also need to pass in query arguments for ID. And we're already doing that in the editor because we do this whole redirect thing, like I already mentioned, when you create a new document. So when you might notice in the browser especially, not the progressive web app, but in the browser here, if I were to go back to the main page here, you see it says documents.new. But as soon as I type something, you're redirected. And so because of, and what's more important is you're redirected and let me just copy some things. You're redirected and your cursor position is maintained, which is was a little bit of more of a challenge than I expected, because when you redirect in Vue Router, it actually typically remounts the component, and that's something I want to happen actually, right? Like if I switch from one document to another document, I want that component to remount and go through its life cycle, because another document is a completely different thing. But when I switch from document/new to the active document that is created after you've entered some text, like I don't want to create a new document as soon as you go to this page, because then you're going to end up with a bunch of blank documents if you don't type anything. But when I do that redirection, because of the component's lifecycle being reset, I kind of had to build out this feature to maintain the cursor position, and that's what's happening here. And that's what that prop is used for. Kind of like following a rabbit hole here, but I'm going to bring us back. So what we really need to do is we need to redirect to the document route, and we need to pass in that parameter, which I wanted to show you is something we're actually already doing here on input. If we don't have an ID, then we're creating a new document. We're calling add document. And this is really similar to what we want to do above, so I'm just going to steal it, where we call router.push name document, params, ID, document ID, right? The main difference here, as you'll see, is that instead of this.document.id, and also instead of initial cursor, we're going to be passing in new doc ID that's returned from our store above. So boom, new doc ID. This is short enough. I can probably just go ahead and put that all on one line. We'll see. It might end up looking ugly, in which case I might change it back. I'll let that slide. That's a one-liner for now. And go ahead and get rid of this comment now. Boom. So what we do is we call the action that duplicates our document. That action creates a copy of our current document, inserts it into the store, and returns the ID of that new document. Then, after we get the new document back, we redirect the user to the new ID. So putting this all together, assuming I didn't do something wrong, which I'm sure I did because I'm live coding all of this. So in a working state, what we'd expect to happen is when I have a document here, so hello world, how is it going? Take note here. Does prettier work with Vue? I love not having to think about what should be one versus multiple lines. Yeah. So yes, it does. Absolutely. And I should enable that. Again, like as we're progressively building this application, the goal is to make this a little bit better every time. And so soon, I really want to reintroduce linting. I want to introduce a prettier definition file, because maintaining like a standard across the application makes it a lot easier for people who are unfamiliar, right? And this is an open source project, and we want to make sure that it is approachable for people. So good call out. Yes, it does work with Vue.js, but no, it is not currently enabled in this project. But circling back, take note of the ID here. And actually, I'm just going to go ahead and copy it down into the document. When I click this duplicate button, it's either going to break, which is perfectly fine because we did just do all of this and again don't have tests, so it might break, or it's going to work. So click duplicate and it broke. Hey, that's fine, right? Like that's something that we can expect. Interesting. So cannot read property focus of undefined. Not exactly familiar with that one, but it looks like cannot read property focus of undefined. I think we're calling dot, let's look in here, focus. We only call focus in one place on this.refs.editable. Because the route changes, I would expect it to remount the code mirror instance that we're running. Let's see. What else did we see in here in this little error output? Promise async type error, cannot read property focus of undefined. Focus of undefined at view component. So what could be causing this? Well, first of all, refs in Vue are not available until the component itself is finished mounting. So I feel like that could potentially be something that is breaking at the moment. So we can dig into that. Excuse me. But let's do this. Let's break this problem down. First, let's see if our duplication itself worked. We should be able to look at view and see if that new document is actually in the store here. So if we close out of that for a moment, if we go into view X, load the state, and we go to the getters, because I want to see the most recent one. So we'll say sorted. The second one, this is our document currently. The ID is 39C, which it's missing actually. And this one is the same document with the new ID. So the duplication actually worked. So that's pretty awesome. It looks like we're running into an issue with the redirection, which given that error message is kind of what I was expecting, but this is a good piece of confirmation, I believe. So let's see. Let me open that console again. Looks like it can't read focus, which means that this component, I'm assuming because the actual route namespace itself isn't changing, the component is not re-rendering, as I would typically expect. And therefore, this dot mounted is remaining true, even though it's not actually true. Well, mounted is true, but I'm thinking that this is a scenario where instead of checking whether it's mounted, we need to see whether or not the route has been changed. So I believe, let's see, this dot mounted, let me see where I even use this. I kind of use this because I'm using refs. Anytime you use refs, you want to be careful about when you're interacting with that ref because of this exact problem, actually. But apparently this is a scenario. Yeah, see, so in code blocks, nerd, yeah, hey, Misty, what's up? Glad you stopped in. Thanks for coming by. We're debugging an issue right now. We just added a new feature to Octo, this application that I've been building over the past year. And of course, part of our feature worked as expected, but then we got an error here. So I'm trying to debug that a bit. So you can see here where I'm calling this.refs, I actually say, I actually check to see if it's mounted first, and then I call this.refs. And I'm wondering if, well, there's a couple things going through my mind. I'm wondering if this is a refs issue down below where we're calling like this.refs.some method without checking to see if it's mounted. But it also, this could be misleading, right? Like I saw the .focus call and maybe my mind's kind of being tracked on it. So I'm going to work it backwards. So where does focus editor get called? Focus editor gets called on ready, which means, yeah, this could potentially, could this happen before it's mounted? I don't know. This is an odd one. So looks like we're going to need to use our debugging skills here. So onReady gets called when the code mirror instance is mounted. The code mirror instance has to be mounted before this is actually mounted. So yeah, onReady would probably be called before mounted is set to true, but that still doesn't make any sense to me, right? Because if focus editor is called anytime we open up this component, then we should be getting the same error on a new document or just opening a document, which we're not, right? If I go in here and I open a new document, there's no error. If I open an existing document, there's no error. So this is only happening on this sort of route redirection. You know, a way we can test this is if it's due to the redirection itself and nothing else, then I should be able to reproduce this error. Maybe, I'll say. I can maybe reproduce this error just by doing some manual route manipulation. So if I copy this ID, open a different document, and then manually change the ID, it should invoke the same behavior through view. Oh, but it doesn't. Let's see. How interesting. Let me go ahead and try duplicate again. Same error, right? Cannot read property focus of undefined. Async to generator. Export, async, runtime. Oh, here we go. Hang on. I am dumb and apparently missed this view router warning. Missing param for named route document. Expected ID to be defined, but it's not. How interesting. So that is funny. It looks like that actually is an issue then with the way that we're passing ID in. And where is that? Duplicate document. Params, ID, new doc ID. So are we not receiving an ID maybe? Let's go ahead and try this. New doc ID, new doc ID. Let's start here. Open this up and duplicate. New doc ID is undefined. Boom. Totally the problem. So at least we know what the issue is now. It should be simple enough to go ahead and fix that. So what could be happening? We call await this.store.dispatch duplicate document. So we'll just kind of follow this chain through, right? So if we follow the dispatch action, we go back to our documents module, we hop down into duplicate document. What we're returning is context.commit duplicate document. We pass the document in. Inside duplicate document, we create a constant. We push it to the state, and we return new doc.id. How odd. Let's think. What could be causing this to be broken? Am I returning data anywhere else? I used to be, but I'm not anymore. Well, we know we're getting undefined back, so I guess we'll kind of work this backwards here. So const result equals context.commit, console.log. We'll just call this action result, return result. This could be something just really dumb that I messed up, which is very likely. So boom. Action result is also undefined. Okay, we're maybe getting somewhere. Let's go ahead into duplicate document, const new doc equals find doc. See, I feel like this part's working because I'm pretty sure we already checked the store to see that it's there. And I think honestly, if we just do this, yeah, see, we've got some duplicates here. And if I say change this one with a bunch of like random stuff and click duplicate again, and we go back to our list, what do we see? We see the new one is duplicated. So the functionality is working, so that's really odd. Let's see, new doc.id. I guess it's possible I'm calling the wrong property. Although ID looks right to me as far as I can tell. Let's find out. Let's log it. So if whoops, I'm in the wrong files here. So let's go right here. We'll say console.log new doc result. It's going to be new doc just by itself. And also give me 1 second here. Okay. Okay, let's see. JS debugging should be called console login. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like there's also a debugger, and I'm not going to lie, I'm just not nearly as familiar with using the JS debugger as I probably should be at this point in my career, especially in terms of my JS experience. But it's also not it doesn't seem to be a very hard to track down problem, in which case I don't feel like the debugger is as necessary. But it could absolutely be useful here, though. So, what was I doing? Oh yeah, so I had just started logging the new document result here. So let's go ahead and run that. Do some text, click duplicate. And we do get a doc. And ID is there. So how? I know what it is. And this is, I was even on the fence about it, so much about whether or not we should do the duplication in the action or in the mutation. And you know what it is? I'm nearly positive that mutations cannot actually return values. I think that mutations just always return undefined, even if you do a return from within them. And I think that that's the reason this is happening. We would actually have to do our duplication in the action and return it from the action before going ahead and pushing that document onto the state. So, excuse me, I'm going to go ahead and just Google that real fast, though. So, Vue.js mutation return value. Yeah. The best way is to dispatch actions instead of committing the mutations directly from the code and having the action return something. So, I mean, if you just know the framework, then you don't run into these kinds of problems. But awesome. Nice, Fox. Yeah, thanks. My tool that I use here for swapping my like tabs between like what I'm doing, so whether I'm like whatever I'm doing, I can have a bunch of open tabs and I can kind of shift workspaces around. It's called Workona. Highly recommend it. But it puts a new image up like every day. And today the image is a fox, and I love it. Super cute. So we tracked down the problem though, which is pretty awesome. Let's go ahead and get that fixed. That's going to be pretty straightforward, actually. So all we're going to do is in our module, we're going to move some of this actually, we can do a little bit of refactoring, but first we're just going to move some of this functionality. So we're going to say new doc equals find doc.duplicate. We're going to move that into the action now under duplicate document. We're going to, here's where some of the changes are going to come in. So we're going to return new doc.id just as we were. But what this made me realize is because we're doing it this way and because we have to do it this way, we don't actually need a new mutation. There is already a mutation that given a document will inject it into the store, and that is the add document mutation. So from this action, we actually don't need a duplicate document mutation. We just need a add document mutation in a duplicate document action. And that's kind of like a separation of concerns there. No reason to create two mutations that literally do an identical thing, which, as you see up here, is pushing a document onto the state store. So let's remove this duplicate document mutation. We obviously still need the constant because we're still referencing the action itself. Whoops, wrong one. We're still referencing the action itself, right? But now what should happen is we should create a duplicate, commit that duplicate to the state, and then return the ID. And let's go ahead and see what happens here when we try that out. So, whoops. Oh, yeah, that's just a view. I used the shortcut to navigate here more than once. So, boom, duplicate. State is not, excuse me, what? Oh, instead of state here, it's actually going to be, what is it, context.state, I want to say. Do I do this somewhere else? Let's go ahead and just try it out. I think state is available on context itself because context is kind of an alias for store. So we'll find out if that works. New document, click duplicate. ID is not defined. Oh, right, because we didn't destructure. Look at me over here messing everything up. I'm actually just going to read the whole method now instead of just changing a couple little pieces. So we receive the context. We receive a document, which is, we really just receive a document ID nested under an object, which is what we would expect. We use that ID. We create a new document. And here I am trying to commit a doc that doesn't actually exist. So we want to change that to say a new doc. And then we commit that new document and return the ID. Okay, I feel a little more confident now that I just reread all of this, and I even caught another error that we would see. So keep going. I know I don't have to create a new document every time, but I like starting from scratch. And here we are with the same error. How interesting. Well, did it work? That's the first question. It did work. It did duplicate as we would expect. What was our return? Oh, new doc ID actually has a value now, though. So that's super interesting, too. How odd. Well, let's go ahead and do a hard refresh here just to make sure everything is as it should be. Create a new document. Testing this again. Duplicate. Oh, actually, okay, so this is, it is working, as you might notice. So it's duplicating the document, and it's updating our URL here. So you might notice, if we duplicate, the URL is new. So it's actually working as expected, but it's still throwing this cannot read property focus of undefined error, which I find pretty odd. Let me click. And it is focusing the editor, which is even more odd. I guess there's a couple of ways I could go about solving that. I still feel like this is potentially like a almost like a race condition between when it's mounted and when it is onReady is called, which I guess we can test. First of all, I'd like to remove some of these like console log calls that I have all over. Actually, I think I might have already removed them. So let's go ahead and do a quick test. Let's do a log onReady. Whoops. Console.log onReady, and let's do another console.log in mounted, and we'll just say mounted. So onReady is called before mounted, which again, that's what we expect actually, so that totally makes sense. And if we call duplicate, we see onReady and then mounted again. So why, oh why, is duplicate causing this problem that otherwise doesn't happen without it? Is it because we're not passing initial cursor? Does markdown editor actually require? Let's find out. Markdown editor has, nope, it has a default for initial cursor, so that's not a required argument. How interesting. So I'm trying to look to see also where this other one is happening. So this happens on text input. We redirect, but as soon as the redirection happens, you know, the user is typing again and again. So I find it very odd that that we're seeing this error when we've already tested this via the URL, right? If you comment out the code in your focus method. Yeah, so I do think that's the cause of this error. So if you look at focus editor, you'll see that there is a .focus. And yeah, if we comment this out, I imagine, first of all, it's probably not going to focus, which is kind of an issue. Like, so when I load the page, it's not focusing the editor, which is what we expect it to do. But also, if I do call duplicate, then yeah, no error, but it also doesn't focus the editor. So yet again, we've got that problem. This.refs.editable.focus. I find that odd because I don't see how, scrolling back up here, I don't see how markdown editor could not be finished mounting, which is when editable becomes available, by the time the onReady event is triggered. That's what I find very odd. So this is actually, I mean, it's kind of like a scapegoat sort of answer, but like I actually plan to decouple like markdown editor and this whole editable stuff anyway. I'm not going to do it right now. I do think that we should probably solve this problem, but I also think it could potentially be avoided by some of the refactoring that I already have in plan down the road, or in store for down the road. So excuse me. Okay, so we call this.router.push. I find it especially odd now because it's actually working. Like I find that so weird. We call onReady, we call this.focus editor. Later we call this.set editor. Global search. Oh, You sure Focus Editor isn't called in any other ways? I'm pretty sure Focus Editor isn't called in any other ways, but that's a very good call out. So let's go ahead and test it. So Focus Editor, I'm going to bring this back because we do want to see that error. We're going to do another log for Focus Editor because I could be wrong. Like this, some sections of this code base I've worked on more recently, but some sections I have not. You would be an incredible coding coach. I appreciate that, Misty. So actually, like, you probably missed this earlier. I believe you were still streaming, but I actually hope to start doing as part of my streaming in like intro to web development course based on a resource that already exists out there for teaching yourself web development called the Odin Project. Thank you. I really appreciate that. But this is just something I've been doing for a long time and something I'm really passionate about. And so I really do strive to like try to understand it well enough to teach others because like I really want others to learn. And it's really hard to teach things. It's really tough. Yes, good, Tiff. I'm so happy. YouTube is screaming your name right now. Oh, man. One step at a time, one step at a time. So I'm going to start with this and see how things go, but who knows, maybe I'll cross-post some content or make other content down the road. So let's test out this Focus Editor console log statement real fast. Just start with a new document here. Focus Editor, it looks like it's called one time per each as expected. Wait, why was onReady called so many times? Oh, I haven't cleared this. Let's clear that. That would be better. So when I click, it's called. Oh, let's just refresh that page. OnReady, then Focus Editor, then mounted. And if I type OnReady Focus Editor mounted, oh, right, because of the redirection. Again, when I type on a new document, it redirects. But if I edit an existing document, or if I refresh this page and edit an existing document, nothing happens. But duplicate, we should see. Well, I guess you all called it because it looks like Focus Editor is totally being called more than one time. So that's awesome. And it looks like we need to figure out where that's being called from. That's so odd. So it's being called once onReady. So onReady, Focus Editor, mounted, and then Focus Editor again. And the reason I find that really odd is because I know Focus Editor is called from onReady, obviously, and that must be where this error is coming from because it does end up being focused, obviously, after we click duplicate. It does focus. So it calls it an extra time, but I don't know where that's coming from. So we'll need to track that down. If you need a moron to teach as an example, then I could be your guy. Oh, Misty, you are not a moron. And as I have mentioned many times before, I don't think it takes a genius to learn software either. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, every single person in the world can become the best coder there is. Like, that's not true of anything, right? But I do think a lot more people can learn it than they give themselves credit for. Or at least learn enough, right, to get into the industry and to learn more. I mean, this is a profession where you just always learn. You always learn more and more and more and more. And, you know, maybe there are, maybe you can find a position where you don't have to learn as much, but it's a big part of this industry is just to continue learning and continue kind of enhancing your skill set. So Focus Editor is called multiple times, as you have guessed it. I think that was Jason Webb Dev, so thank you for calling that out. Now we just need to figure out why and where. So it looks like on click we call it. Looks like we call and I mean there's only one place. Super weird because there's only one place that actually calls it as far as I can tell, which is onReady. Hang on. Focus. Yeah, and this is how weird. I mean, we've got the @click, but obviously a click event shouldn't be happening. Oh, wait. I wonder if the click of the button is triggering a click on the outer content. Let's do click, where's our button here? Let's try @click I think it's .stop to stop propagation. Hey! Good call out. Awesome call out. That totally did it, and that totally fixed it for us. I've never done Vue, but I do a lot of React. Maybe it's somehow calling focus editor on the component that gets unmounted. Yeah, also, I would have been pretty lost, honestly. I think the only reason I realized it is because being familiar with this application, I do know that I have a click handler on this entire wrapping like component for the editor. And because this button is nested under that editor, it still fires that click event. And that's just something I just like happened to remember, thankfully, because who knows how long that would have taken to track down. That would have been a slightly harder one to debug, I think. But that's awesome. So it was a duplicate click event that was happening. So I think what essentially was happening was my click on duplicate was causing that focus editor call to happen at the same time as the component remounting. Going to bed. Good stream. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for stopping by, Webcom. Yes, we fixed it. It's working. We added a piece of functionality. I mean, honestly, the only thing left, and this is awesome because we're getting fairly close to the 2-hour mark, which is what I'm aiming for tonight. Now all we have to do is we need to commit the changes, first review them, commit them. We need to merge them in, and then we need to deploy it. And then, if everything goes well today, we won't take down the site by doing so. But this is great. This is absolutely awesome. And actually, I think I'm on the fence about this, of whether or not I want this to happen, but I'm really tempted to have this, I'm really tempted to have it maintain the cursor position, because like I did notice, like as I'm typing, right, and I click duplicate, it moves the cursor back to the beginning, but I don't know if it would make more sense for it to just stay wherever the cursor was. We can still hype code. Yes. I appreciate it, absolutely. And I'm glad that you all are sticking around and hanging out. This has been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun working on this feature. We've worked on something that's a little more complicated than last time, right? I'm not saying it's anything crazy, but we actually did get a new feature done. One of the issues on GitHub here. That's not the right thing, but this is a pretty big issue, and one that I think is going to be super useful. Now I'll just be able to, with a click of a button, duplicate a document and not have to do all that copying and pasting that was being done before. So also I'm going to throw that under the beta milestone because I think that makes sense. I'm going to do the same with the other one while I'm thinking about it. I think that for the beta, these are features that seem relevant. Eventually we'll get the beta out there, but right now we're still in alpha stages. So ability to duplicate a document. We just built that feature. You just witnessed it, and that was a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and review everything now. So you'll notice we have no new files. We didn't create any new files, but we did do quite a few modifications. So let's go ahead. Actually, I'm going to clear this first, and we're going to do a diff. We added a new button with a click event. Necessary classes, minimal as can be. We have a new SVG here as an icon in our duplicate button, and as far as I can tell, it looks pretty good. It looks as I would expect. Actually, maybe I'm crazy, but it looks like the spacing on that icon might be a little bit off. I'm probably just crazy, but it looks like the right margin on this is 0.25 REM. And if we look at this other button, are we also at 0.25 REM? We might be. It might just be the icon offset making it look a little bit different. The right margin is 0.5 REM. So the margin spacing there is actually half what it should be. And that means we actually need to fix the spacing here. This SVG right now is 0.25 REM, which is 1/4 of the font size. And this top one is 0.5 rem, which is 1/2 of the font size of the HTML, HTML element of the document, so the root element of the document. Very subtle. Glad I noticed that, because if I would have noticed that later, that would have probably driven me crazy to notice the spacing was off on that. So we're going to go ahead and fix that one last thing, and then we'll be able to commit it. So, well, we'll go ahead and finish reviewing first. So we've got duplicate document action. We've got the duplicate document method here in the editor. Hang on. Yeah. Oh, we have a console.log we need to get rid of. Another console.log we need to get rid of. Another console.log. We'll just exclude those when I do the commit. And the duplicate method on the document itself. There's the action. Here is the new duplicate document action import in the document module. Yeah, looks good overall. So let's fix that spacing issue. Oh, it's pretty late. I'm heading to bed too. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you again for stopping in, Jason Web Dev. It's been awesome. I really appreciate the help. I appreciate the engagement and the just like chatting with you. It's been a lot of fun. And you helped multiple times catching some mistakes that I made here and helping me track down some of these problems. So yet again, thank you. That was awesome. So let's go ahead and finish that up pretty simply with, let's see, how do I want to fix the spacing? I could give it a straight margin right on here, although I try to avoid those if possible. I think I'm just going to convert this SVG text combo into what I call a label. I actually already have a concept here in Octo for labels where you use, switching back to the browser, where you use an icon next to a piece of text, and that's why the spacing is different, is because this button actually uses a label, whereas this button here does not. And the labels will automatically apply that margin. So we're going to go ahead under our components, under icons and labels here. Actually, I typically create an icon, I believe. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and create a new icon to represent duplicate. So we are going to actually have a couple of new simple files here. Actually, I'm going to just duplicate an icon for duplicate. So duplicate. In here, we need to update the name to duplicate. We need to update the path to match. So we need our SVG paths here. Good. Okay, so the duplicate icon looks good. Now we just need the duplicate label. Whoops. Again, it's going to be called duplicate. And we're also going to call the icon duplicate icon. And we need to update that reference here. Boom. Okay, so we've got our duplicate icon and then some text, right? And then this, I don't know if it's in the icon. I don't remember if it's in icon itself or if it's in base SVG. It's probably there. Super odd. I actually don't see where the margin right is happening. On that icon itself. Did I just miss a class probably? On base SVG. It just says deflex, line item, center, justify content, center. The icon says base SVG, nothing in here, and then the label says flex grow 1. Couldn't tell you, honestly. I don't know where we're inheriting that, so I'm going to have to look here and find out if this doesn't actually fix our problem, because it looks like it might not. So what we're going to do after that is we've already actually included a label, so it's going to be very similar. We're just going to call this duplicate label, and that's going to call labels duplicate. Whole lot of importing all over the place here. And then we're going to inject that as a component here. And I like I said before, I like to keep things mostly, actually, I'll just keep it with the other label here. I know it's not quite the same as like the default alphabetical, but that'll be okay. Okay, so we've got duplicate label, and then we just need to convert this into duplicate label, which we'll do. Just like below, you might actually see where it says code label on line 13. It's going to be the same exact thing now, so boom. Let's see if that did it. That did fix the spacing. So where it's inheriting that SVG margin from is, here's the issue. So this component of the editor itself has some scoped CSS that's only applied if it sees that element in this template, and it was shrinking the default right margin to 0.25. Why that's here, I couldn't tell you. So let's see, are we using SVG anywhere else in this? And it's scoped, so let's go ahead and just remove that, because we don't need that. So just some leftover CSS that was giving us problems, but that's okay. Converting it to a label was actually a good idea anyway, because eventually we're going to add that duplicate button to the list view. So that saved us some work for down the road. All right, let's clear this out, take a look again. I'm going to do a git add-p, which lets us add it in patches. So we're adding the button, duplicate label, looks good. We are adding the duplicate label import, the action import, duplicate label component mount, duplicate document method, which does the redirection. We don't want the console log, we don't want that console log, we don't want that console log, and we do want to remove the SVG styling. We do want that method. We do want that action and the action export. We do want to import that action in doc. Actually, hang on, wait, did I? Am I losing my mind here? Import doc from oh, that's a line. We're in the document.js module. I was like thinking we were in the doc model and I was really confused. No, that's good. Do we want the action? Yes, we do. Okay, good to go. So the only things that we didn't add are the new files. So we want to add source, components, icons. We want to add source, components, labels. And so now the only thing left in the diff should be those console logs, which we don't want to include anyway. Yep. So we are going to commit that, add ability to duplicate documents from the editor. Concise description, gets the point across. All right, and then since this is just stuff we don't want, I'm going to reset it. That's just an alias I have. It's the same as running git reset -- hard head. So reset hard head, hence RHH. And that's all we need to do. And now I think we just need to push it. And then we can create our PR, give it one last glance over, and merge it in. Excuse me. So if we look at pull request, it should say, hey, you have a new branch that you just pushed up. Let's compare in pull request. Add ability to duplicate documents from the editor. Yep. This is going to close number 47, I think it was. Yep. Oh yeah, it's in our branch name for a reason. Summary. From the editor, users can click duplicate to create a copy of the active document. This will then redirect them to the copy. All right. I'm going to give myself this Hacktoberfest accepted label, since that's what I've been participating in this month. Looks good. Okay. Let's review that diff one last time. I know it's redundant, but I do this so that I don't introduce unnecessary code. make sure the names match. So we've got duplicate.view, duplicate.view under labels, a duplicate as well. Looks good. Also going to do one more little just like test run here. So a new doc, copy the ID over, and then click duplicate here. Boom, it worked. Look at our list. Good to go. All right. I feel confident, committed it. Again, I do testing before I do a version bump anyway, so I think we're good to go ahead and merge this in. And there we have it. Merged in. So we picked up an issue. We built out the feature. We ran into some bugs yet again, did some debugging. That's always fun, always good, I think. And we merged it in. So I think this is a good point to call it. We're at 2 hours and 4 minutes according to my clock here. It's been awesome. Thank you everyone for stopping in. We are of course going to continue doing this. This has been fun the multiple times that I've done it. If you would like to connect with me, I think I have my Twitter. It looks like I have my Twitter and my GitHub linked in here. Please feel free to connect with me on either of those places, preferably Twitter. You know, that's where we can actually communicate. Obviously, you can follow me on GitHub if you'd like. You can find Octo here on GitHub. It's Voracious Dev is my username, and Octo is the name of the app. You'll see it actually pinned to my profile if you go here. Open source project. Really hoping to continue working on it here on stream. It's been a lot of fun. It seems like it actually worked out pretty well. This is a new thing, you know, trying to talk through while I'm working on things. Typically, it's more of a heads down scenario. So hopefully you enjoyed it. But again, connect with me on Twitter. Take a look at the project on GitHub, and please, like, feel free to like stop back in and have a conversation. I've been absolutely loving it. I will likely be doing a Web Dev Wednesday stream again on Wednesday. I had fun with that last week, but I'll post updates on Twitter regarding that as well. And this upcoming Saturday, earlier in the morning, probably around 10, if it happens, I might be doing a dual stream with Guy Royce. He's on Twitter and Twitch as Guy Royce, R-O-Y-S-E. Another amazing developer in the community. I believe he's a developer advocate, but he loves to build really cool things. And we, last Saturday and this upcoming Saturday, likely, we've been working on an 8-bit game using a technology called Webassembly. And we're using the Webassembly text format because we're nerds and we think it's fun. So, like I said, thanks again and have a good night. See ya.